anytime there's a change to the organization like the one that this situation has brought about, it's always important to educate and to train on, what that means for them. Also, not to be draconian, but also to have them understand and acknowledge what acceptable use of the new technology is. So if you've rolled out VPN or you've rolled out collaboration tools as part of this, having them understand what they can and can't do while using those tools. And of course, you can put technical restrictions in place, but the majority of our customers barely had time to formulate a plan for some of this, let alone do any sort of deep dive on hardening and validation testing of those controls, which obviously are important activities, but the number one priority was to get people connected and working and to maintain and continue operations as quickly as possible. And so the safety net for not having those technical controls to a certain degree is making sure that your users are understanding not only how to use the technology, but how to use it in a secure fashion and what they shouldn't necessarily be doing with those new tools. So there's a big piece of that. And then the third, probably biggest reason is that the attackers, aren't going to stop in all of this. In fact, they're going to ramp up their efforts as we've seen. Anytime you have a situation like this, it actually presents itself as an opportunity for a lot of people that are trying to gain access to things they shouldn't have access to and exploit and gain financially from a situation like this one. So there's a couple major reasons why we should continue training. Is it at the top of everyone's list? Probably not. As I said before, there's a lot of things taking priority just to make sure that we keep moving our organizations forward from an operational perspective. But to pause on training altogether or to not introduce new training to respond to some of these changes is not only a missed opportunity, but could be potentially harmful to the organization in the long run. So, Brian, I don't know if you had anything to add to that, but it seems like a couple of our customers are taking different approaches, and maybe you can talk a bit about, the dialogue you've had with some of them.
Sure. Well, I think for starters, for the most part, any of our information security clients have, very clearly understood that, training is pertinent, especially during this time. Again, users are connecting in new ways through different technologies. And again, the opportunity here is, not seeing security as a hindrance. Security is something that's going to allow you to implement these remote work and new technologies effectively and safely. There's more and more regulations that are starting to be passed down, whether it's, GDPR and California Consumer Privacy Protection Acts, things of those nature. So there's a regulatory aspect to it and a compliance aspect, but also, you don't want to be the next company that's in that headline of they got breached and, their personal information got out there, or they got ransomware and their operation is shutting down. Implementing this security training, by its nature, the human aspect is always going to be the soft spot. You can have technical controls in place, but you need employees to be able to connect in, and you need them to be able to do that securely so that, they can work. So having that training in place of, what are the things to watch out for? What are the additional risks to be concerned about when you're connecting from home or, from a personal device or even from a, company issued device? What are the additional steps that you need to be taking to ensure, the security of, your company's information and operation in that time? So again, I think all of our clients have embraced that training. Training is key as they're rolling this out. We've had, a couple clients that as they were, kind of rushing to get the hardware and the technologies in place, they were concurrently running, training courses of, hey, here's what this is going to look like for you. Here's what you should be doing at home. Here's how, here's a couple tips for, home computer security. So those types of things, again, as you blur that line of, where's business, where's home, and where can business be conducted from, making sure that your security training addresses those different aspects.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's, a good point in terms of, obviously educating the users, but having them, kind of fully commit to the new the new norm, so to speak, because you mentioned ransomware, and this response effort just on the pandemic front is challenging enough. To add something like that into the mix, could obviously be very detrimental to your operation and stop it dead in its tracks. Fortunately, amongst our customer base, we have not seen anything of that nature to date, but everybody's on, that the ransomware organizations or, cyber criminals, I believe a couple weeks ago said, being the good Samaritans we are, we're not going to attack hospitals during this crisis, but that leaves the rest of us still on the hook for that. So, we want to make sure that we're doing the proper training of our employees to not get to a situation like that. And obviously, you have your technical controls as a fallback. Another thing that we've seen as part of all this is the introduction of multi-factor authentication and next-gen antivirus as part of the strategy. But all those controls need fine-tuning, and some of us haven't really had the time to get to that and validate those controls. So again, the safety net is the training in this particular scenario.